I don't think I'm morally responsible for anything.
It's no follow-up, it's no front matter, it's straight into what matters. Bugglebots, Heat 1, 2019, just. I was so worried Bugglebots 2019 was going to turn into Bugglebots 2020.
Oh dear, I'm sure you're not the only one.
Just for the naming convention, that's the only thing that would have bothered me. If they'd needed more time, I would have supported them. But it would have made it so much harder to talk about.
I mean, all they'd need to do is get the first episode up on the 31st and it would have been fine. It would. Then the season would have started in 2019, because it's not finishing in 2019, is it? Like, the last episode is in January. The
majority, on the timetable that we're assuming will happen, the majority of the main series will happen in 2019.
Yeah, but not.
And that's what matters here.
Not the entirety of it. And if it doesn't require the entirety, then, you know, you might as well just... How much... There we go, we're going to define something immediately. How much of a season must be in a year in order for it to be that year's season?
More than half, because then on average it's taking place in that year. And because years have to be integers, it can't be the, 2019.6 series or whatever, although that would still make it 2019 by my book.
You can definitely do non-integer years.
What, so it's currently... Oh, that wouldn't work. I was going to say it's currently 2019 and 12/12ths, but that's just 2020.
2019 and just over 11/12ths.
I mean, surely you just do 2019 and fraction over however many days there are in a year. That is not a number that I keep in my head. I want to say 365, but I'm not certain.
That makes about as much sense as imperial measurement, so I think we'll be fine. The Americans will love it.
But how many grains have we gone through this year, Sam?
God.
We said there'd be no preamble. This is preamble.
Right then, what's new in Bugglebots then? What have they changed? What's different? How do we feel about the change? All these questions and more. Right after this. No, I'm kidding.
So in terms of what's new, it's kind of nothing and everything at the same time. So the format is almost identical. So the heats run the same way. 3 1v1s, winners straight through to the heat semi-final, losers in a melee for the 4th place, and semi-finals go on. The one slight change is what happens after that. So heat winners still go into the grand final straight away. Heat runners-up go into a rumble for the 6th grand final spot. All the melee losers go into a 10-way wooden spoon rumble. The new part is that all of the losing semi-finalists have a 10-way rumble, which gets them into the rumble that the heat runners-up are in, which could potentially then get them into the grand final. So in principle, well, first of all, everybody now gets 3 or more fights, whereas last time, if you were a losing semi-finalist, you could come away with only 2. And in principle, a robot could win the whole series after a total of, I think, 9 fights, of which 4 could be melees.
What a path that would be.
I feel like there's going to need to be a graph for this, because I did not explain that as well as I could have. Although my graphing skills would probably make it worse. Second big change, as people will have seen, is the interviews. So we now have the couch.
The couch?
Do you not remember the couch? Or is it a sofa to you? Or a settee?
It's clearly a sofa. I can't believe that you've just said the word couch and not made it as a joke.
Admittedly, I'm now upset at myself when I think about it, but I don't know. That isn't a sofa. That wasn't comfortable enough to be a sofa. That's just a couch.
Well, the sofa. What happened on the sofa?
Interviews. You were there, Sam. You've watched it too. You know this. It's like you're trying to get me to say something stupid. But no, we have the sofa for some interviews and just generally more places that interviews are happening. I really like the interviews out in the little foyer with a little audience. I think they look the best, and I think it's also really nice to be able to do those interviews with some people that aren't the crew watching. I think it turns on that kind of performance instinct that pretty much all of us had. And I think you get a better interview out of it. So that's been a really neat little change to me as well. It also means you get the silent arena walk of doom, which I particularly enjoyed. Last change is a completely behind-the-scenes thing that I think is the most impactful of all. And I didn't even realise this was a new thing for this year. I thought it was the same last year. But there's a test arena in the pits.
Did they not have that last year?
Apparently not, no.
How would you even do anything?
I know. I think one of the key criticisms that was completely fair last time round was that you had quite a lot of robots going into fights and not really working properly. This year, you're going to see robots working properly, and I think that test arena is a big part of the reason why. You know, if anyone's there in a situation where they've taken big damage and they're having to rebuild, they have that there to go in, see if things are running, tweak things kind of at will, rather than, I assume, first time round, they just used the main arena when they could for testing, which must have been an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, because when you're building a robot, there's like a big difference between an on-bench twitch test and actually driving it for a few minutes, like being able to drive it in circles even for just 30 seconds and fire the weapon a few times. Just gives you so much more confidence that it works, and it will uncover so many problems if you've not put it back together properly as well. Just to sort of even give it 30 seconds in this test box, and being able to use it pretty much at will was great, and yeah, I think is a largely responsible for the improvement in the reliability of robots this time.
So I think that's everything that's kind of a major change, isn't it? Unless you've spotted anything that I didn't.
I think you've broadly covered it. I mean, the interview format is very different, obviously, and reduces a lot of duplication, which was nice. And I can't remember last season all that well, but was there the same sort of level of like behind the scenes in the pit stuff going on? Because there was like those clips of people walking back to the pit straight after a fight that were used, and also a few shots from in the pit. Did they use that last year or not? I can't remember.
As I recall, there were a few bits, but I would expect a lot more this year. Because, again, behind the scenes info, there was pretty much constant filming in the pits with us. So they will at least have a lot of stuff that they could use.
Yeah.
I must admit that when I've gone back to watch last series, I have kind of zoned out for stuff that isn't the fights. So that's probably the area where my memory is weakest. One thing that has really stood out to me watching the old series is just how small the crowd was year one. And it does, probably because I'm looking for it now, it does really show in a lot of the footage. Whereas this year, much bigger crowd. Much bigger crowd. I didn't realise how big comparatively our crowd was. Which is just awesome in every single respect. The fact that so many people, presumably on the basis of having seen the first series, wanted to come out and see it live is amazing. And, you know, we're very egotistical people. We need a crowd. We need an audience.
Have you spotted yourself in the crowd yet?
This is quite an important note for this whole episode. I think we only saw one of these fights live.
I might have seen two of them, but yeah, I think we didn't see many.
I think the only one, certainly I saw, and now someone's going to see me in the crowd for another one and prove me wrong. The only one I think I saw was the melee. Because this was the first heat filmed. So the early stages of it, we were in the pits sorting other stuff out with our sort of interviews and that.
Yeah.
So we couldn't really... Well, maybe we could have gone and watched it, but I was certainly far too nervous about going and doing my interview to have any kind of fun anywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors here where I think if we knew what we were doing, absolutely there was time to go and watch more fights. But yeah, nerves and sort of just general freaking out and not wanting to delay anyone meant that I think we spent a lot of time in the pits that we didn't need to.
Yeah, we were basically terrified of not being somewhere when we were meant to be and slowing everything down. So we were very conservative with the amount of fights we went and watched. We did have, and I think this is actually slightly visible at times in the edit, we did have a feed from the arena into the pits where we could see some stuff, but there was no sound. So it was quite a surreal experience watching a fight happen and not hearing it and just suddenly seeing a robot fly across the screen. So as much as we're obviously going into this knowing the outline and the broad strokes of what happened, a lot of this is as much of a surprise to us as it is anyone else.
Yeah, for sure. It was really funny watching this because this is all very familiar, but I couldn't tell you anything that happened. It was very bizarre. There
are also things that I'm fairly sure I just straight up misremembered. But we'll get to those. We will get to those. Shall we start with the first fight of the episode, which, by the way, was also the first fight of the filming?
Certainly. Are you going to line every single thing up with the order it was filmed in as well?
No, I just thought that was a fun little thing to mention. It's completely irrelevant, but...
So I was hoping you could sort of, you'd thread the needles there, be like, this was, it was the first one broadcast in this episode, but it was the 6th one filmed.
I think this one was filmed on a Tuesday.
That would be impressive.
I mean, I do have the real heat order here, but that's not interesting to anyone.
Are you sure about that? Imagine yourselves on the other side of this. If we were watching this just as spectators and you heard someone say, "Oh, I've got some inside information, but it's not interesting to anyone," there is no way in hell you would not be emailing them immediately saying, "I must have this information. Reveal it at once."
As if I would email anybody associated with the Robot Combat Show in order to get information that hasn't been released publicly. That is an assault on my character, and I'm offended.
I'm sorry, but also not at all sorry because I'm right and you know it.
You don't know me, even I don't know me. So, Rust in Pieces versus Sir Lancerfrog. A fight that was filmed at some point in the weekend.
Right, well, should we start with talking a little bit about Rust in Pieces then? And I think they I feel like they took something from you when you were analysing the trailer, which I find quite funny.
I had a great time at Bugglebots, and I've carried a lot of memories away, memories that have come to mean a great deal to me. And probably the most cherished memory of all was the way we were the first people to use a mini-bot on Bugglebots. And then Heat 1, Fight 1 comes along.
Immediately in with the mini-bot.
The crown ripped from my head, tossed aside, split into two, and handed out to a pair of evil people.
Oh, so harsh.
You see, the problem is, I knew they were a multi-bot anyway, and therefore just didn't pay attention to the fact that had actually happened.
And there is a distinction between multi-bot and having a mini-bot as well.
Yes. This is kind of squares and rectangles territory.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear for the audience that we know that multi-bots exist, but there is a difference between having that and having a mini-bot with your robot. They're completely different.
No. Hello, there is a cluster bot and you know it.
It's not a cluster bot because it doesn't start as one robot.
I've recently learned, by the way, that technically the rules in BattleBots do demand that cluster bots start touching each other. As in start the fight touching each other, not just start touching each other at some point. That's a very different sentence.
One of those is far more interesting than the other.
Rust in Pieces was one of those sort of quiet and unassuming robots that I didn't think to expect anything from.
Yeah, they were proper dark horses in this.
It's funny because we've seen Wee-Woo be really effective as a pair of half-weight wedges, and for some reason that just didn't connect in my head of, oh, these guys are dangerous. I think maybe, as shallow as it is, I think seeing the fact they were two-wheel drive, immediately in my head just went, they won't have much push. But they had a lot of push and they had a lot of speed, and the driving, the coordination has been spectacular throughout this heat.
Yeah, I thought they drove really well. I disagreed with the commentary on this quite a lot. I thought they did very well. I mean, there's always room for improvement for sure, but I think they did remarkably well.
I think it's very hard to recognise what good driving is. That's the main thing I've learned from competing and being at events live, rather than relying on what a commentator tells me to think.
Yeah, I think part of it is that in order to sort of judge whether the driving is good or not, is you need to know the intent of the driver. And that's hard to know. And I think there are situations where you might assume the intent of the driver, which is not the intent of the driver, and therefore sort of go, oh, they're bad at driving because they're not delivering the intent that I think they have. But, turns out they're perfectly executing what they're trying to do. It is a very hard thing to judge.
I suppose at least when you've got a multi-bot, you've got some things you can judge them on in terms of, are they constantly driving into each other? Do they attack as one or as two seemingly separate robots? And in this case, you do have a bit of them driving into each other, but not nearly as much as you would expect. And there were a number of key moments in the fight where they only get the upper hand because they are coordinated. And I don't know how they do that. It seems like it's some kind of telepathy, because you don't really hear or see much chat between them, unless they're just very quiet about it.
Maybe they've got hand signals.
Well, yeah, the hand signal would be, I'm making this move on my controller, wouldn't it? Neither's actually looking at their robot. They're looking at the other guy's transmitter.
Maybe they're actually the Borg.
No, that's the Berg. They're in a different heat.
Oh, God damn it. I regret everything.
And so you should. I also find it interesting that they've gone for a cluster as a two-person team, because it's something that I don't think ever really occurred to us. It seems like a really sensible way forward when you are sort of working as a pair.
I think it probably can be. I think that it's not like... I wouldn't go back and sort of try and build a cluster bot, I don't think.
I suppose we kind of achieved the same thing by going mainbot and minibot, didn't we, in terms of both of us having something to do.
Yeah, but like the actual process of designing it and building it and stuff, I think there's a lot... I mean, you know, you could... There's lots of ways of doing this. You could do it completely independently and both just separately build two robots within certain specifications, and you could obviously, you know, do something close to what we did where you're working together on the design of two robots, or you could, but yeah, with two people, it's perfectly feasible to both have a very active role in designing and building the robot. So like, it's not like it didn't, like I said, like with you, it didn't really occur to me to build a cluster bot, but I'm not sure I'd be interested in doing that anyway. I enjoyed the process of collaborating on a single robot.
I think it's also down to the fact that I have no confidence driving whatsoever. So I was happy to hand that off to someone else. But again, for these guys, it's something they've done at an amp weight scale, I believe, and they've built it up. That sounds like the horrible thing where we're implying there's a progression up the weight classes. I don't like doing that. But they've kind of taken the success they had there and applied it to beetle weights in very much the same way. And they've done a fantastic job, as I said, right through this heat.
Yeah.
They've also beaten one of my favourite robots in the world, which is very upsetting. I don't think there's a single thing about Sir Lancerfrog that I don't love.
It is a beautiful machine, isn't it?
It's beautiful in the way that I want robots to be beautiful, where it doesn't just look good, it has the function built in.
Yeah, like the mechanism for the lifter, I think, is really great.
Always love a 4-bar.
Always. They have such a great motion. And the other thing that really sort of blew my mind that I didn't sort of fully appreciate until Marlow was that thing's made of HDPE.
I know.
It's like, it's so... we had such a nightmare dealing with that stuff. And you got Sir Lancerfrog here that just looks immaculate. It's so annoying. I'm so jealous.
I think it helps as well that Nick actually knows how to paint stuff properly.
I mean, I imagine that, you know, I suspect he put a lot more time into his paint job than we did ours.
No, I think it shows that Nick is an artist. An absolute, true, honest-to-goodness artist in so many ways. If anyone hasn't seen, and you probably won't have seen this, on Facebook, he's essentially got a whole picture book going for Sir Lancerfrog. And it is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. If he made a picture book for children, I would buy it and read it with whatever class I had. Hands down, no doubt. It could be full of nothing but profanities and I'd still read it with them.
No, if it was made for kids, you'd buy it and just read it to yourself.
Also that, yeah.
Because it involves robots. I mean, you know, you're not gonna turn your nose up at that, are you?
Robots and fantastic illustrations. What more do you want? And of course, we're saying all this about the aesthetics. Worth saying again, such an incredibly effective machine.
Yeah, it is a really good robot. I think he struggled with, because one of the pieces that were rusting had the wedgelet things on the front of it that seemed to be very effective. Like Nick could very easily get under one of the robots, but not the other. So I think there was some difficulty there. But yeah, I mean, Lancerfrog is a great robot, no doubt.
And let's face it, Lancerfrog in its 2 1v1s has had very difficult draws. To start with, a wedge cluster, you already don't expect that to go well for a robot that is built around control.
Yeah, there's not a lot that he can do in that situation because obviously, yeah, you can pin and control one of them, and then the other one will just come and free his friend, you know. So yeah, it's a really tricky draw.
Something that's just occurred to me: we both have experience of driving in fights with multiple opponents, and Lancer Frog is a robot that's had a lot of success in ballets, rumbles, gladiators, whatever you want to call them. I wonder how different it is to be up against two coordinated opponents than in that kind of melee rumble situation.
I don't know. I mean, I can say that like when you're in like the melees and stuff, like I mean, I can't track more than one other robot. Like it's very much I pick one and drive towards it, and there'll be someone else attacking me. And I honestly, there'll be situations where like I've been watching someone's video of one of these rumbles back and gone, I had no idea that I was being attacked by that person. Like, no idea at all.
I mean, the gladiator from Marlowe, there were robots that you didn't even remember being in there, weren't there? That you had spent a long time fighting with.
Yeah, exactly. Because you just sort of like, you get so focused on one robot or sort of, and doing that. So like, I mean, for me, I definitely get tunnel vision. And I suspect that in the big sort of like rumbles and stuff, I think it doesn't... As long as you don't lose track of the spinners, which I definitely did in Marlowe, it's sort of fine. You can sort of get away with that. But I imagine that if you're fighting a cluster where they are coordinated and stuff, I think having tunnel vision would be bad. So for me, at least, it would be very different. I don't know what Nick's like when he's driving. I don't know how well he tracks all of the opponents. Better than me by the looks of things.
I mean, he's an exceptionally calm and calculating driver.
Yeah.
But I still can't imagine going up against a cluster like this being anything other than pure anxiety.
Oh, it'd be a nightmare.
It's like I'm genuinely feeling a little claustrophobic imagining having to do it.
You wouldn't even have to do it. You'd make me drive.
I know, exactly. And yet I'm still feeling it. So as much as it was an unfortunate end for Frog to be the one down the pit, all of my sympathy for that fight.
Yeah, that was a great opportunity seized by Rust in Pieces there.
Oh, absolutely. And again, all through, they've just taken every single chance they got in every fight they've had.
Yeah.
Shall we crack on then to the next one?
Yes.
Hold My Beer versus Halo.
Oh my goodness me, what a machine is Halo. It's such a sort of pure distillation of that idea. I absolutely love that there's just nothing in the middle of it. It's like I love the optimization there of everything on the outside, absolutely everything on the outside. And I think it's a really well engineered piece of kit, which is unsurprising given how educated they all seem to be.
I felt so inferior hearing them go through their degrees. If I'd known that at the time, I'd probably have felt quite bad.
It's like 5 or 6 degrees between them. It's like, oh my God, I struggle to get one. Crazy. In physics, no less.
It's no surprise, though, because every part of that robot just screams. What does it scream? It just screams, frankly.
It's a really well thought out design, and I remember because they wrote about it, didn't they? And I did read through their blog posts about it, and they did the maths on this. Like it is all so well thought out and sort of carefully considered. It's a fantastic machine.
And a combination of that and just the fights we've seen it had at US events made it probably the most hotly anticipated robot in the tournament. Certainly for those of us who were there. If you asked basically anyone in that building, who were you most excited to see fight in the flesh, Halo would have been the answer.
Oh yeah, they were well up there.
It's also a robot that a lot of people wanted to fight, us included.
Oh yeah,
I'd
have loved it.
It's funny how the scary machines are the ones that you most want to fight, because I think you get a much better sense of just what power it has that way. It's all very well seeing it, but you want to kind of feel it by proxy as well.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want another bit of insider information?
Always.
I don't know if you remember this, but like the Halo team blew everyone's mind with their removable link.
You see, part of me doesn't want to talk about this just because we want to steal it. And the more people we send this information out to, the more people can do the same. But yeah, their link was amazing. And I'm going to let you talk about it, but don't mention that part number you got off them.
Well, I haven't got it to hand, so I couldn't mention it now. Maybe it'll make it into the show notes if I can find that picture again. But yeah.
So much you haven't got it tattooed on you somewhere. You were that impressed by it.
Oh, it's so cool. Right, so most Beetles in the UK use like an XT30 or sometimes an XT60 as the link. They just sort of like, you just solder a loop around one bit of that plug, and then that's your link. And that's fine. Like they're a fairly tight fit. Ours in particular is a pain in the neck to get in and out, but it makes for a good link, and that's sort of the standard that a lot of people use. But these guys have a plug that is if you yank the wire or sort of like the tab on the wire or something, then it doesn't come out. It locks into place. But if you grab it by the casing of the plug and pull that, it unlatches and comes out, which means that they can sort of have their link in there and not have fear that it's going to get knocked out by something hitting it, because it would have to sort of pull the plug to do that. Whereas it's very easy for a human, either the team or the event organizer or whoever, to just get in there and trivially just pull it out. It takes very little force to pull it out as long as you grab it in the right way. It's very clever. And yeah, they had a small crowd of people around them at some point, all taking pictures of the part number, being like, "This is amazing! I've never seen this before. I must have it."
It's basically the childproof cap of removable links.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what happens when someone comes to a problem fresh with the mindset they have as engineers of, okay, someone solved this problem already, but can we solve it better? Which none of the rest of us really think to do. You ask someone what they use for a link, they go, oh, it's these, and you go, great, they work. They took a risk with that and came up with something that is so much better.
Yeah, super cool.
So let's face it, if any robot is going to be worried about their link popping out, it's going to be one that sort of stores and delivers as much energy as Halo does.
Yeah.
One of the things I find really interesting with Halo is that we were all excited to see it, but I don't think that many of us had actually high expectations of it going very far, purely because of the arena it was having to fight in.
Yeah, and in an enclosed arena like that with a pit, it's such a glass cannon what happens to it, like any sort of full body spinner, but I think especially the Melty Brain, because it just has so... Obviously, they have a lot of, like you saw in their fights and stuff, like once they got it moving and once they had the beacon in range and stuff, like it can move, like it can translate really well. But as soon as it hits something, it just goes all over the place, and they've got absolutely no control. So yeah, I didn't expect it to win a lot of stuff unless it got a clean knockout on its first hit. But yeah, super excited to see it fight.
And this fight with Hold My Beer, while they won it, I think exemplified all of the difficulties they were potentially going to face in every fight, where they're incredibly powerful, but they don't really have the translation speed to chase an opponent down who doesn't want to get hit, which means the pit timer is basically meaningless. And once the pit is open, I do think that if they were at full speed, cannoned off the wall and went over the pit, they would probably skip straight over it. But as soon as they're slowed a little bit, they're in real danger.
Yeah, you don't really want to be designing a robot that sort of you have to trust that it will skip over a pit to be successful. That's a big gamble.
I do have a think that I personally think this should have been a closer fight. I think Hold My Beer had a very good chance of actively going out and dominating this fight. Because the design of it, up front, the part that's actually going to get hit, there's nothing really important up there. So it was a robot that could go in and dictate the way it got hit and take a couple to put Halo in that bad position, to potentially get them in a corner where they don't want to be, to potentially get them slowed down and stopped. And I thought that holding back, while I completely understand why that's a strategy you would try, I don't think it really gave Hold My Beer a chance to win. It just gave it a chance to last.
I largely agree, but Hold My Beer has a lot of openings on the front for a spinner to sort of get in there and catch it and do all kinds of stuff. It's not like they've got a nice, clean, low wedge on the front of it. It's sort of approximately wedge-shaped, but because it's got the opening and the sort of exposed panels and stuff, I think there's scope for any spinner to get in there and do some real damage.
Absolutely. The way the claws are designed with that kind of top and bottom panel coming together to a point does give a really nice bite point. But it doesn't seem like the kind of bite point that would get them completely immobilized.
I don't know. I think if Halo got in there more than once, I think it could tear the robot in half.
I mean, it's either an explosion or a win, and I consider that a win-win. But I will never criticise someone else for, looking after the robot they've spent ages building. It just happens to not be our style.
Yeah, this is definitely the thing where, like, I'm looking at it and going, if I were driving, I'd have been straight in there. Like, no hesitation, just bang, straight away. But yeah, if it's... that's just us.
Hold my beer, we've kind of skipped over here, but it is a beautiful little robot.
It's very your style, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, any recreation of an old school robot, immediate thumbs up. And the fact that it's a recreation of one that Jerome built himself as well, I think is really important. Okay, not gonna... Okay, Yep, fine.
I'm just confused. I'm sort of trying to parse that. I'm like, who built what? I'm confused now.
That fell about as flat on its face as it could have. Jerome went to great lengths to point out that he didn't build the original, because everyone seems to think he built the original. And I was playing on that.
You're spreading misinformation that he built the original.
I'm not spreading misinformation, because every Spinnerproof listener is informed enough to know that that's not true. It just happens that one of the hosts is...
Oh, I'm not coming out of this looking good.
Put it this way, that joke is now much better now that I've explained it, so thank you for that.
I mean, that's how you know a joke fell flat on its face, if you improve it by explaining it.
No, any robot that is a recreation of an old school Robot Wars competitor immediately gets a thumbs up from me. Anything that is anything other than a spinner in a world of spinners gets a thumbs up from me. And anything brightly coloured, frankly, gets a thumbs up from me as well.
Yeah, it's a very cool design. It definitely adds something to the field, and I think that I'm going to pronounce this wrong, and I'm concerned now. Jerome, is that about right?
We'll go with that. That is I was going to say ignorant English person's pronunciation. That is the uninformed English person's pronunciation.
I think he's a funny character as well. So it was really great to sort of like his very dry wit and stuff was very entertaining.
His opening interview, as soon as he got the can, is one of my highlights of 2019 TV. Absolutely superb stuff. And it's great that in Bugglebots we do have a set of characters, most of whom are characters in terms of being larger than life and enthusiastic, and he just manages to go in completely the opposite direction, and I absolutely love it. He's also built what is internally a really neat machine. I don't know how much of a chance you had to look at how it works.
No, I didn't get that far in the end.
There's a really good set of build photos on Facebook, which I'll throw in the show notes. But the whole weapon works off a big lead screw across the back.
Yeah.
And the way that the mechanism for that is kind of wound and woven around everything for the drive is absolutely beautiful. I won't even try and explain it, you just have to see it.
It's definitely a robot that I'd look at and go, oh, that seems quite simple to build. But actually, if you stop and think about what it would take to do it, you go, no, that takes a lot to make that work. I think it's, I fully expect that internally that is a lot more complicated than you may think it is.
I think there is a simple way of achieving something similar just by actuating it all on a servo. But it's going to be flimsy as hell and not look anywhere near as good.
Yeah.
So yeah, an absolutely brilliantly made machine, which, again, in this case, got a really bad matchup. I think the melee matchup was also quite a bad one for them. Yeah. Although by that logic, you could argue there's almost no good matchup for it. Maybe us. That would be quite a good matchup.
I'd be well up for that.
Well, as we've already established, we're up for basically anything.
If you have a robot, we'll fight it.
Well, there is one exception to that. Certainly by my book.
What's that?
And that is Maximum Overdrive.
No, I'd fight Maximum Overdrive as well. No hesitation.
I've said this
Maybe
a number
first.
of times. Yeah.
But at some point...
I've said this in a few other places and it bears repeating. If you looked around that room, if you looked around the pits at Euros or anywhere, you will not really find a robot that we would turn down a fight with. Maxim Ogre Drive is the one I would think about first. Every other robot, you have a fight with them, they damage you, and you repair it. Maxim Ogre Drive, with one good pin and attack, can completely destroy a robot beyond all reasonable repair. It is legitimately terrifying. It's also what makes it so exciting to watch, and it's part of what would probably make me want to fight it anyway after thinking about it.
What are you thinking they'd hit that would make it in beyond repair?
Imagine a battery fire in our robot, Sam.
We could rebuild it.
Half of it would be melted.
That'd be fine.
Okay, you would rebuild it, but would you rebuild it in the few hours you've got before your next fight? Probably not. That's the key
You'd have
here.
to try.
Oh, we'd try. We'd get something in, but it wouldn't look like the original.
No, I think you'd probably sacrifice the weapon if nothing else.
But that is what Ogre Drive does. It doesn't just end your fight, it potentially ends your tournament. And as I say, that makes it scary, it also makes it exciting. And I think, as spectators and viewers, we all want to see it fight because it might do that. We'll feel bad for the opponent afterwards, but boy do we want to see it. And also, we still have Ogre Drive to thank for us actually getting back in the arena at Euros, because without the delay that it caused with the battery fire, we probably wouldn't have made it.
Yeah. A hat tip to you, sir.
I suppose we should probably talk about K2 while we're here.
Nah, it's a boring robot.
And no one's really heard of it.
Nah, what's it ever achieved?
The thing is, like, we joke about that, and that was basically the view going into Series 1. As far as I'm aware, it hadn't had that much success before, but it just has that blend, that vicious blend of weapon power, drive power, and patience, essentially.
Yeah, it's unremarkable in all the same ways that Bite Force is, really.
Exactly.
And it makes it a formidable opponent. It's just like so stable and planted, and the weapon is just enough power. Like it's nothing excessive. It's enough to make a point.
It's not generating and storing a huge amount of power. It's not generating power at all. That's not how robots work. It's not storing a huge amount of power, but it delivers pretty much all of it when it hits. And that's the really key thing. And it gets up to speed so fast that there's no way you're not getting hit by it.
Mm.
It's also driven by an absolute stone-cold killer.
No remorse at all.
I think when we arrived, we popped in on the Friday night just to get acquainted with the place before competing on the Saturday. And as I recall, I could have my timelines a bit off, but as I recall, Mark was one of the first people we saw. And I very vividly remember him coming over, looking at the robot, just going, "Oh, I like the look of those wheels." And they're just walking away. It's just so every time he looks at a robot, he sees exactly how he would beat it, and then it's just there forever.
I mean, doesn't take a mastermind to spot the wheels on our robot, though.
It was the glee with which he looked at them, the glint in his eye as he imagined removing them one by one.
As if Christmas came early for him.
Yeah. We've also seen just how durable it is, not necessarily in Bugglebots, but certainly at Euros. You look at the fight with Wayo. Sorry, I'm going to try and learn to pronounce this correctly. Wayo, the fight against them in the very first round, again, it will be in the show notes. It took an absolute beating and did not stop. So even if you've got a robot that can take the hits, you've still got to try and find a way to kill it.
Yeah. No mean feat. Maybe you need to drop it in a big vat of molten steel or something.
Is that a reference to something I don't know?
Well, I mean, you should know it. I'm disappointed that you don't seem to have immediately got it. What about if I said that you could kill it by using a industrial hydraulic press?
Are we making Terminator references here?
Yes, we are.
It's the K2 bit that I don't get the reference with. Hi, today on Spinnerproof Explain Their Jokes.
I wasn't making a play on K2. I was talking about ways to kill a Terminator.
Oh, okay.
Because he's relentless and takes a beating and never gives up, like a Terminator.
Would it help if I went back and just recorded a laugh for you? I understood that reference. Ogre Drive did come, I thought, very close to doing some critical damage, in that it looked like it was about to get a chance to come down on that weapon pulley. And what a different fight it would have been from there.
I think the geometry of the two robots meant that Ogre Drive couldn't get the weapon clear, couldn't get the saw clear of K2's weapon. So it was a very risky thing, I think, to try and get the drive. But yeah, it would have been incredible if they'd managed it.
I don't know if there's anything more to say on this one or not.
Funny, a lot of K2's fights we're not going to have a lot to say about about K2's fights because they're just always inevitable. You know?
It's always really hard to commentate on perfection because all you can do is gush about how good it is. Which I'm happy to do once, but I don't like to do over and over again. But suffice to say, you've all seen it. It's a great performance from K2. And you can now use that piece of audio and just slip it in however many more times we need across the series.
Excellent.
So that leaves us with Sir Lancer Frog, Hold My Beer, and Ogre Drive in the melee. Question. Did you see Hold My Beer after the Halo fight?
It looked pretty beat up, but I don't sort of feel like I looked at it in any great detail straight after the fight. Why?
That's the thing. I remember it looking really badly damaged. And on camera, at least, it looked kind of fine. I'm wondering if you remembered what damage there was.
The whole I want to say the rear right wheel was bent, was almost detached, I think.
I remember that whole motor mount pretty much being dead. Like, one whole side of the robot seemed to be quite shredded when we saw it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I just thought it was worse than it was, or if your own kind of played it all down because he's a pro, or what, but the scale of the damage definitely didn't quite come across in what you saw. It was in a bad way. And he had a lot of work to do to get it ready for this.
All that work in, and then everyone just ignores him in the fight.
This is one of the things with the melees. I think you often get one robot that kind of gets a bit overlooked. Especially because, again, I'm always a bit wary of saying this because I don't want to accidentally create too much hype. But with the field you've got this year, I don't think we're going to see a Redemption melee that doesn't have at least one or two extremely good robots in it. Because the whole field is just really good.
It's a bold statement.
And it's one that I will stand by. So if you're there, kind of shocked that you've got a robot like Ogre Drive having to come through this melee, get used to it. Because you're going to see more like this. Not necessarily because there are upsets, but just because there are so many great robots.
Yeah. So many great robots.
And then this legitimately was an upset in a sense, if only in terms of the way Ogre Drive went out.
Oh, that was such a shame. It'd be so horrible to have your robot just die in the middle of the arena for no discernible reason.
When I got back from the event, immediately started making notes ready for this moment. And my notes for this episode were really sparse because we didn't see many of the fights, and there was only one thing that I had written down, which is Ogre Drive's drive died and it was sad. That was all I wrote for this whole thing because that was the overriding memory. Again, we said about everyone wanting to see Halo. Ogre Drive is another robot that everyone wants to see in action because it's really cool to watch. And we'd missed the first fight, we came to see this one, and it just couldn't perform. And I think that's always the saddest thing that can happen is for your robot not to let you put on a show. And again, I say that meaning no disrespect to Sir Lancer Frog and Hold My Beer because they still had a good little fight. But when you've gone in there wanting some damage and suddenly the chance for damage is gone, it does leave you with that feeling.
Yeah, when you say you've got a fight between two plastic robots and Ogre Drive, you sort of expect the fight to go one way, and then to have it go not that way for a rubbish reason like that is a real shame.
I do think, for the record, that Sir Lancer Frog and Hold My Beer, if only together, did have a really good chance of getting rid of Ogre Drive in this fight. I don't think this was a foregone conclusion in any way whatsoever. Especially when you've got 2 control bots and a pit in play.
I wasn't trying to suggest that it was like a clear win for Ogre Drive here. It's just like, you expect there to be a lot of damage at the very least. You sort of think there's going to be a lot of excitement, lots of damage, lots of soaring, and it's going to be great.
For the record, I wasn't saying that to mediate what you'd said, more to mediate what I'd said.
Everyone's been mediated.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about the rest of the fight based on that, because what we saw was Lancer Frog doing what Lancer Frog does best, and shepherding an awkwardly shaped robot towards the pit. Also really good, by the way, to see Lancer Frog working fully in this fight after the issue he had very early on in the first.
I think the sort of interviews after this fight, when Jerome was talking about the robot, he couldn't tell which way up it was.
Yes,
I found that really funny, and I think it's a very it's one of those things that's really obvious in hindsight. I think until it's happened to you, you don't necessarily think about it. I can so easily imagine making exactly that mistake. You sort of get so sort of focused on having this really nice, elegant design, and it's got all this great symmetry and stuff. And it's not until you put it in an arena and find yourself upside down and go, I have no idea how to tell which way this is without trying to drive. And if you're trying to drive right next to the pit, that is a stressful moment.
And the worst thing is, it's the kind of thing that you could fix with a sticker.
Yeah, it's such a simple thing.
A piece of electrical tape fixes that problem.
Yeah, I think it's such an easy thing to overlook.
And again, that's one of the advantages you have going in as a more battle-tested robot. You've had the chance to make all those small mistakes.
Mm.
And it's why new builds will always have perhaps a slight disadvantage. The element of surprise is also there, but you do have to learn these lessons as you go, even when you're as experienced as he is.
Yeah.
But the real upshot of this is we get to see more Lancer Frog, which by my book is always a good thing. Also means more pages for the book.
How many pages?
Am I meant to know an answer for that?
Guys, another reference you don't get. Have you seen Little Britain?
I try not to. I have strong feelings about Little Britain.
So we can move on then. We have Rust in Pieces versus Halo.
This truly is a masterclass in how you take on a scary horizontal spinner. Lots of aggression, great hit and run tactics, and a couple of big sticks.
They did everything right in this. I have no criticism at all about the way the Rust in Pieces approached this fight. It's just we're going to rush him, we're going to keep rushing him, and then we're going to get the pit open as soon as we can. And glorious.
I said earlier about I'm not sure how you judge whether people are good drivers or not. I wonder how much of my opinion of their driving in that first fight is based on me having seen their driving in this fight and then rewatch the first one. Have I, in my brain, established that they're good drivers from this stunning bit of work and then applied it to things I'd seen before? Or was this kind of the culmination of everything else I'd seen them do?
I mean, I can't speak to your brain and how it works, but I can tell you that when I watched this for the first time, I did disagree with the commentary on my first watching in that first fight. So I think they were driving well the whole time. I don't think I've retconned them in my head to be good drivers.
I love how you've turned calling them good drivers into I was right all along. Which is a situation I put you in where you kind of had to do that.
What can I say? I'm always right.
God tier commentary.
Oh, yeah.
I think if you wanted to detract from their win, you could argue that the pitting was kind of lucky. Because we do know, we saw this last series and now this time as well. The slight seam around that pit does seem to give Melties a bit of trouble. It obviously throws the way they move just enough to make it difficult to get off of there. But at the same time, they had got Halo stopped a couple of times already. They were as in control of where Halo is as you can be. And at some point in that fight, Halo was going to be near that pit. As long as you keep moving it around, it's going to be there at some point. So I don't think it's luck, I think it's inevitability.
Mr. Anderson.
Oh, God.
I'm full of references today. This is great. I'm glad you finally got one.
I was going to say, it's not actually that often we find that we share a little cultural touch point. By the way, one of the weird little things we did get to see in this fight is how ridiculous Halo's drive is. Because there's that one moment where instead of being in spin mode, they go into drive mode to get out of a bad spot. And you see what direct drive brushless looks like. And guess what? You're getting more of that next week, and it is glorious.
Yeah, they pretty much teleported across the arena. It's crazy.
I think if they could, they should have made that one little part of the show 60 FPS so you could actually track them.
No, they should have put up some little like text at the bottom, being like saying you made me use 10% of my power or something like that.
Oh God, you're doing this on purpose now.
I have no comment on the matter.
I need to transition out of that now, thanks. Again, the whole build diary is there, and they will give a much better account of why that is their setup and why it's so effective than I ever could. But suffice to say that spinning fast needs fast motor.
Yeah.
And they do spin very, very fast.
That they do.
In fact, something we haven't really mentioned yet. I don't know how... I mean, we're not the people to really pass on this information. But I don't know if people realise just how well optimised Halo is as a design. That is, within reason, pretty much the most energy you can pack into a 1.5 kilo spinner. There are very few things left that you can do to make a more energetic melty than that. Apart from spin it faster.
Yeah.
The physical design of it is close to perfect. It's real diminishing returns from here, you feel.
Yeah, for sure. It is the purest incarnation of that idea.
And as a result of this defeat, we get to see it in a 10-way melee. I loved their attempt at confidence with the "we can attack in every direction."
Yeah, that they can.
I think what they were really thinking was, we need to get spun up first.
Oh, that'll be good. I'm excited about that.
That would be very good.
It will be very good. No spoilers here.
Is it a spoiler to say that a fight will be good? Or is that just hype?
So I can say it will be a good fight because it carries about as much meaning as it would as if I wasn't even in part of this series. So it's fine. No spoilers.
I don't know if it's kind of worth, I realise this will be effort for you, it might be worth slipping this little bit of conversation as an after show, because I generally want to know how people feel about that. Is an opinion on the quality of a thing in itself a spoiler?
I think it can be. It's really hard when people give me recommendations. I try to encourage people to just say this is worth watching, or worth seeing, or worth reading, rather than trying to be like. I think the problem is when people start saying, "Oh, this is so good," they sort of, people I think very quickly fall into justifying why it's so good or something like that, or I don't know.
It's an interesting one.
A conversation for another time, I suspect.
All of those melees are so good. So good. Should we get back to normality?
Let's do it. Up next, we've got Sir Lancer Frog versus K2.
The first hit of this fight might be one of my favourites, just in general, ever. Because it's the combination of what is essentially a perfect box rush and the perfect spin-up from a lightweight but effective weapon. That box rush could not have been better, and it still got him a double backflip.
Wasn't fast enough.
You were saying earlier about it being an HDPE wedge. Boy, do I love HDPE wedges just for this.
Such good bite. So satisfying.
This again feels like a really unfortunate matchup for Lancer Frog in terms of wanting to win and progress. But in terms of a fight to go out and entertain, it's a great matchup. Because Lancer Frog is a kind of robot that will always take a few hits before dying. And that's what a scary spinner like K2 needs.
Yeah, it works really well for everyone, because obviously you get the very entertaining fight with lots of hits and stuff. And also you get to, if you're K2, you get to show that you've got a robot that can keep delivering as well. That it's not just like a one-hit wonder, and it can keep going through, it can take its own damage. Because obviously, it's said this, everyone knows this. Spinners, you've got to be able to receive your own whatever you're delivering as well. So yeah, it's good to be able to show that K2 can withstand itself.
You're the wrong person to ask this, but did we ever see K2's weapon broken in Series 1?
I mean, why would you even begin asking me that question?
Well, I've got no one else to ask it, have I?
As far as I recall, no. But, take that with a giant pinch of salt.
I mean, at Euros, we saw it completely ingest a wheel and still recover. It's an extremely durable setup.
Yeah.
The way Lancer Frog died was really weird as well. I'm not sure it was very clear in the episode what happened. I think a lot of people will hear a sentence to do with the word link when a robot is knocked out and assume that means the link fell out. As far as I'm aware, that's not what happened here. Lancer Frog had a little cover that kind of held the link inside the robot once it was linked, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That got hit and broke. The link was still fine. The link was still plugged in, but it was able to poke out the top of the robot and stop the wheels hitting the ground. Because you can see the wheels very clearly still turning. I'm guessing at some point the weapon had died by virtue of the fact it had been, delivered about 5 or 6 big uppercuts by that point, and there was no way for him to kind of jostle so he'd get a wheel down.
I'm surprised the servo lasted even one hit.
That is the one disadvantage that I can see of that 4-bar system.
Yeah.
The old style, if that sort of wedge gets hit, it just flaps up, it's not attached to the servo at all, and it drops back down again. Everything's happy.
Yeah.
And I do wonder that, and I feel like there's every chance this is an aesthetic consideration. I do wonder if there is a way to sort of bring that back a bit for these kind of fights. Lancer Frog has always had a tougher time against verts. I wonder if there's a way to kind of have another front end where the actual lifting part is kind of tucked away, almost like Lucky's system. Right, it's a wedge that then feeds onto a separate part of lifter. I've explained that terribly. Look at Lucky, imagine that, but not pneumatic, and significantly smaller.
Done.
Because Lucky's been so effective with that setup.
I'm trying to think if you could sort of like do a 4-bar system that didn't have the servo attached to anything meaningfully.
What, so it's just pushing on part of the system rather than actively linked to it and then gravity resets it?
Yeah.
Seems like the kind of thing that should be possible, but it doesn't mean it would be good.
This is true. I mean, it's an idea out of my brain, so it's almost certainly a bad idea.
Yeah, but people are going to have to wait to see how bad our ideas are. Or just watch our fantastic post-Euros video. Link in the show notes.
Oh my God.
Almost said the word description there. Bailed out at the last second, ended up with a weird inflection. Your discomfort sustains me.
Right then, K2 swiftly dispatched Sir Lancer Frog, and then they fought Rust in pieces.
This is the fight where, if it wasn't already clear, everyone surely learns that K2 isn't all about the weapon power. Not because they don't do some damage here, but because the hits they're dishing out on each half of Rust in Pieces are similar to the sort of hits you see Beetles dishing out on other full-weight Beetles. This is when you kind of see that it doesn't have crazy power. It just utilises it so well.
Still trying to parse the first part of your sentence.
I'm not surprised. It wasn't a very good sentence.
So yeah, like I guess its weapon power is scaled for half-weight Beetles rather than full-weight Beetles.
That is a much better way of putting it.
But yeah, still amazingly effective. Like having the relentlessness and the bite is definitely a very, very important part of Spinner design.
K2 made it look like it was only up against one robot. Just by being so controlled, so planted, and as soon as it gets one of them up in the air, it's like it's starting to hit the other one before the first has even landed. Because it's got the speed, the manoeuvrability, the agility, the everything.
So I was watching this and thinking that Rust in Pieces needed to be more coordinated. You needed to sort of like try and do more coordinated attacks to deal with K2. But like, I think the difficulty of trying to do that, because the windows you have are minuscule if they're there at all, for doing something about K2. It'd be so hard to make use of them with a coordinated attack. So yeah, K2 was very well driven.
I've never rated the driving of Rust in Pieces. They're just not coordinated enough in general, and I don't think they really got the handle of those machines.
Oh dear, they did, and they did lots of little touches in there. Like, so there was one point where one of them was on its side, and I think it was K2 in the end that did knock it down, but the other robot was going for it. And then there was a bit later on when one of the robots was dead, but the other one did go and like nudge it just to sort of make sure and stuff. Like little touches like that of just trying to sort of like rescue your other half. Again, I think that's just deceptively hard to do, to have the clarity of mind in the moment to go and do that. Because like, again, we've not driven a clusterbot properly, but like when we've put split decision in as well, like I have no idea where you are at all. I've never known for a moment where you are in those fights when we've done it. So to sort of be able to have the clarity to know, oh, the other part of this robot is a bit stuck, let's go free it. And I think there was another point where it was like stuck against the, like by the pit button, wasn't it? And they freed it from that or something. So it's sort of like, yeah, like repeatedly looking after each other. And I think that is deceptively hard to do.
What was incredible about that is that there was no panic of, I've got to go free them now. It was, I'll get there when I'll get there. I've got time. I'm going to do it in a way that is controlled and doesn't give K2 too big an opportunity to get at me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point.
It was exceptionally well done. You say about us sort of driving together, I think the only times there's been any kind of coordination between us would be at Euros when you were stuck on the pit and I was telling you how little I could do to help. That's like the only time we've thought at all about how we're driving together.
Yeah.
Link in the show notes to that video.
Oh, no, enough with the self-promotion. It's terrible. We've spent entirely too long talking about it ourselves. I mean, an episode that doesn't even include us.
We're in it once.
Oh.
This isn't the heat final that many, if any, would have predicted, but I'm so glad this was the heat final. The way the episode had gone, you went into it with a sense that either robot could potentially win. You knew that it was kind of a long shot for Rust in Pieces, but they'd shown what ability they had. And then it ends as a demonstration of why K2 is the champion it is. It's a pretty much perfect episode arc.
Almost as if it was scripted.
I was going to say, I think some people...
Wait, I wasn't supposed to say that, was I? Whoops.
So everyone knows the Berg wins anyway. I think some people have kind of questioned this as a first episode in terms of, was there that much action? But I think that story is why it's a great first episode. You've got your champion there, it is tested, and it comes through. I think that's really valuable to have and to see.
Yeah, and it like the whole episode kind of builds up to it as well. Like it's all building towards the final, which is what you want, really. And I think it's really, if you know nothing about any of these robots, I think it's got good pacing and a good escalation towards the end. And if you do know the robots, then it's got the upsets and stuff in there as well. So I think it is a really good first episode.
Yeah, completely. It starts with the fight that is very much one for the purists. I do, by the way, think this is a very British episode, purely in terms of the amount of involvement the pit has.
Yeah.
But you start off with a really solid fight that doesn't have massive hits from spinners, but it has some really good driving and some really interesting robots. And then it kind of escalates through with Halo hitting things very hard to the indestructible Rust in Pieces actually breaking. Everything about it just has a really nice thread. And we will stop this before I talk in circles. Outro.
What should people tweet us?
Their favourite Spinnerproof video.
I was going to go with favourite vegan snack, just for my own amusement.
What? Okay, go for it.
Well, I just think, at some point I'm going to be random enough that someone might actually tweet us something.
Yeah, I'm fine with basically everything you suggest. It was just surprising.
The thing is, I wonder how many people just immediately stop listening the second I say you can find the show notes. Like, I wonder if that's just it. People just go, okay, episode's done. Like, do people even hear the thing that people should tweet us? I don't know. It's terrible.
If they do, they should tweet us about it.
You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/62. There you can find links to all the stuff we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us your favourite vegan snack.